Welcome back to Movies TV Mad. You can follow me on Twitter at Movies TV Mad. Smash the like button if you love me. Subscribe if you're new. Please have your say. A very warm welcome to Friday's edition of the DC Universe Daily. So this time last week, we were talking about the long-range domestic box office projections for the Flash movie. They were looking very, very healthy at around 115 to 140 million for an opening domestic weekend. Well, tickets have been on sale for a few days now, and now we have a more accurate projection for the opening domestic for the Flash movie, and it's for a soft 70 million opening weekend. I did warn you about this. I did warn you about the possibility of the Flash movie opening softly. I did pre-warn you. This is why they said Tom Cruise and Stephen King loved the movie, and this is why there's been a multitude of fan screenings with more to come, hoping that the good word of mouth could save this movie financially. Mick haltingly always tells you what's going on, and I give it to you straight down the barrel, because this is not about just gaining your views and your likes. That's why I don't get many of your views and your likes, because I throw truth bombs, and truth bombs are not very, very popular. But I did pre-warn you about this situation. So at this moment in time, the projections, more accurate projections than the long-range projections, which were more generous in what the movie was going to open up with domestically. So now we're looking at a soft 70 million opening domestic weekend. What does that make the film earn after a month? Globally, I think we're looking at Justice League and Man of Steel total global box office, which was around $650 million, give or take, lower or higher, slightly higher than that. This means the movie gets its money back and makes a really, really small profit. Don't forget, the marketing drive has been huger for this movie. Let's get one thing absolutely clear. Let's not get it twisted. The Flash movie is a very, very good comic book movie. It's not one of the best comic book movies ever made, but it's solid and it's good. Check out my non-spoiler review. But it's not without its problems. There are problems within the movie. You will see them yourself. You will identify the epic things of this movie. Stuff that I've told you I've really enjoyed, but also stuff that isn't as good. But why aren't people rushing out to buy tickets for this movie? Well, there's many, many reasons. Here's two. We always knew that some fans would boycott Ezra Miller because of his antics in the real world. I don't blame people for doing that. Also, the liberties and the disrespect paid to Superman in the movie, these are things I never agreed with, because Superman is my man. He's my character. I think Henry Cavill should have been in the first act in this movie alongside Batfleck. That was disrespect. Then you look at the reverse engineering of Flashpoint Superman and swapping him for Flashpoint Supergirl. These are things that always were going to hurt the movie. But it just really, confirms the clusterfuck that the DCEU has always been. And there's no question about that. That's the situation we're looking at. We look at Black Adam. We look at Shazam! Fury of the Gods. Both flops. The Suicide Squad. Birds of Prey. As I've said many times, since Snyder has gone, they've only had one big hitter. And that's Aquaman. And even the director and lead actor of that movie was stunned the movie made so much money. Since then, Shazam didn't even make $400 million. Then we look at Wonder Woman 84, Birds of Prey, The Suicide Squad, Black Adam, Shazam! Fury of the Gods, consistently coming in with really low box office. There's no defense of those box offices. There's no way you can spin the narrative. And there's this whole thing of DC fans on the internet and a lack of DC fans in movie theatres. I've said before and I'll say it again, and I haven't changed my mind on this. It's not DC fans that are not going, it's the general audience. I said this the other day to the culture nerd who's got his own platform. He was really excited about the box office potential of the Flash movie, and I said, yes, DC fans are going to go in, but is the general audience going to support this movie? He said he believed that they would. And this soft opening proves that the general audience, again, are giving the DCEU the thumbs down. I don't blame James Gunn and Zaslav coming out saying, best superhero movie ever. That's their job. Zaslav is the CEO of Warner Brothers Discovery. Gunn is the co-CEO of DC Studios. What do you expect them to say? That, you know, it's problematic, that Ezra Miller isn't a good person? What do you expect them to say? They've tried to avoid the subject of Miller as much as they can. But at the end of the day, Miller is the elephant in the room. And he's damaged the box office potential of this film. Also, you know, you can't sell a movie on an 80-year-old Batman, which is exactly what they've been attempting to do. When the consumer are driving, whether you're successful or not, the consumer's not dumb. This generation of audiences are very, very intelligent people. You can tell them that Tom Cruise loved the movie. You can tell them that Stephen King loved the movie. We've seen the very desperate tactics. And from these new projections, it's looking like people are not going to fall for this shit. Because people are intelligent. They think we're stupid. They think you and me, the consumer, are dumb. And we're going to fall for things like Tom Cruise loving the movie, apparently, Stephen King apparently loving the movie. As I said, I did pre-warn you about this situation. And so, you know, when I first saw the 70 million soft opening, I was kind of surprised considering the long-range projections. But the difference between a long-range projection, and that's why it's called a long-range projection, and the projections we're getting from ticket sales, because now tickets are available, is that long-range projections, clearly they were pulling these projections out their backside. But how do they establish the long-range projections? Well, they look at social media, they look at interactions. They had no fiscal financial evidence of what they were saying. They predicted 120 to 140 last week, long-range projections. That was never, ever a realistic number. I was as surprised by that number as I am by the 70 million soft domestic opening. And the latest Disney Pixar film is going to open up at around 40 million, which is even worse. Disney are even more dead than WB. And, you know, when you look at the 70 million soft, projected opening for the Flash movie, you've also got to look at another situation, the second week drop. Every movie drops from week to week. Super Mario Brothers dropped, but dropped really small numbers. So they ended up making a record-breaking over $1 billion at the global box office. Now, the Flash movie is certainly, with these soft opening projections, is not going to get anywhere near $1 billion. So this doesn't really make a difference to what James Gunn is planning. This is what we discussed the other day. There was never a situation where, any of what's going on this year with the DCEU makes a difference to James Gunn's plans. James Gunn's plans are James Gunn's plans. Maybe one or two DCEU actors would have, got the green light to continue in the franchise. I think that's more unlikely now when you look at what happened with Black Adam and Shazam! Fury of the Gods. The talk of these people being involved in the new DC universe has been muted. But let's talk about the fact that Zaslav gave Batgirl a tax write-off and shelved the movie. Do you think that maybe it would have been a better idea to give the Flash movie a tax write-off and at least release Batgirl on HBO Max, which was the original plan? The thing is with streaming, different. The difference between streaming and releasing a movie in the theatrical system is that when you release a movie on streaming, it doesn't make any money individually. You know, it's a library. It's part of a library that attracts or doesn't attract people to the platform. So when you release a movie, there's no direct money coming from it on streaming. It's part of the platform. As I said, when you release a film theatrically, it brings in money or it doesn't bring in money. And Zaslav reversed the idea of Kilar to make DC movies. And this is one of the reasons they shelved Batgirl. But here's the thing, and here's the bad look about the whole Batgirl shelving. Leslie Grace and the cast and the directors of that film behaved themselves. They were professional. They didn't embarrass DC or the characters or that world by acting the way Miller acted in the real world. But they got punished by their movie being shelved, and they didn't do anything wrong, right? If any movie deserved shelving because of Miller's antics, was the Flash movie. But the reason that Batgirl was shelved instead of the Flash, that Zaslav believed the Flash movie it had more profitability theatrically than the Batgirl movie, which is true. So it was a total business decision. But the reputation of Zaslav fell down straight away, because as soon as he shelved that movie, people were after him. I believe if he shelved the Flash movie instead of Batgirl for a tax write-off, I believe many people, most people, wouldn't have lost their shit. There would have been a few fans complaining, but the people you don't want to upset wouldn't have been upset. I'm talking about people from Access Media. I'm talking from writers, directors and actors who have destroyed Zaslav on social media. I think he should have shelved the Flash movie, but he didn't. Because as I say, he saw a lot of profitability. So was it worth, if this movie ends up globally at around 650, and that's being generous, I don't even think it will end up at 650, but I think that when you look at it, and when you look at the soft opening of 70 million, if in fact that's going to be the case, who knows, they may get lucky and do more than that. But it's not looking good, because to go from a long-range projection of 120 million to a long-range projection or a short-range projection of like 70 million is a huge come down. You know, I think Justice League opened from 50 to 70 million. And people said that was a disaster, but that was a Justice League movie. This is an individual standalone Flash movie, but it does have a lot of cameos. So, but I think the days of cameos and IPs driving money to Hollywood are over. The Marvel Cinematic Universe really created a trend of IPs, but I think the IP is over now, and I think ultimately they're going to go back to making one-off standalone movies and not embracing IPs. I think you'll see less and less comic book movies being green-lit. And I don't think the Flash movie shows superhero fatigue. There's many reasons that the Flash movie is going to open up softly. Now, I think a lot of people will be surprised that the Flash movie will open up to 70 million if that's the case. But, as I say, there's mitigating circumstances why this movie is going to open up so softly. And as I say, I did warn you about this, weeks ahead of schedule, that this isn't the movie they're trying to sell you. The hype isn't real. I think it's very interesting seeing like lots of YouTubers doing like 1 hour, reviews, non-spoiler reviews on the Flash movie, and some of the shit they're saying is, it's eye-watering, it's cringe-inducing, and the stuff they're saying isn't accurate. I can be balanced about that movie and say I enjoyed it, but ultimately, it's not the bestest thing ever. But if you look at the fan screenings, the advanced fan screenings, it's called fan screenings for a while. These are the shills. These are the people, you could show them a film for 3 hours with, an empty garbage, can there with nothing happening. They come out telling you, best movie ever. Oh my God. And they start foaming at the mouth and telling you, this is the greatest achievement of all time. Every fucking movie reaction is the same. And, you know, I think we're all at a time now where we know not to believe them. I don't believe anything people say about movies until I see the movie. The only review I'm interested in is my own review. It's always good to see what other people have to say about movies, but you've got to pick honest people. And disingenuous people who are just saying good things about movies to keep on making money on their platforms and to keep on getting access from Hollywood aren't good people to listen to at the end of the day. So it's another example of a lot of people falling for the hype and thinking this was going to be $1 billion movie, maybe even better. I mean, I didn't know. I mean, at times I started believing the hype. I started believing what they were selling me in terms of what it was going to do in the box office. But, you look at Keaton, and, they really thought that Keaton was a huge selling point. And that's another question for you today. Considering this movie is potentially going to open up to a soft 70 million, was it worth bringing in Michael Keaton? Or should they have kept with, Jeffrey Dean Morgan's Thomas Wayne, which was Zack Snyder's original idea? And here's another question for you as well. Would it have been better to do a faithful adaptation of Flashpoint with the Amazonian and Atlantean battle with Thomas Wayne, aka Jeffrey Dean Morgan? Or would it have been even better not to do Flashpoint at all at this stage and do a smaller origin movie for Barry Allen? Was the way they put together the Justice League ultimately hurtful for the Flash and other characters? Should we have done what the MCU did, which was build up the solo movies first, then do a Justice League movie? Let's look at the introduction of Ezra Miller's The Flash. He appeared in a great cameo in the first Suicide Squad movie. He then was in 2 cameos in Batman vs. Superman Dawn of Justice. Again, very good. But we never got to know his version of The Flash until Justice League and Zack Snyder's Justice League Snyder Cut. And also that was very highly damaging. We saw one version of him where he was a Joker in Justice League. Then they did a better version of him in Zack Snyder's Justice League Snyder Cut. But was that the right way to introduce the Flash? Was it damaging that he didn't get his solo movie first? Because originally I think we were going to see a Flash solo movie before we saw Justice League. And they've had so many different directors, so many different visions. And Ezra Miller himself has fought against certain creators being on that movie and fighting against their vision for the movie. Was Miller part of the problem, or was he part of the solution? Well, considering he seemed to be fine with Superman getting baited and switched in this movie, maybe he was also part of the problem. But he is only an actor, and an actor doesn't have that much power on a movie unless you're Tom Cruise. He seems to be the only actor the industry actually listens to, and the only actor who actually knows what he's talking about. Although it's very, very interesting, isn't it, when we look at the lady who plays Wanda in the MCU, and she's not being very flattering towards the MCU and Kevin Feige right now. She's even saying she's advising actors to only sign up 1 movie at a time with the MCU. She wasn't happy with what they did with her character in Multiverse of Madness, so she's being very, very public. So the MCU is imploding like the rest of Hollywood. I mean, Warner Brothers has been imploding, for a long time before David Zaslav joined the party. Look, Zaslav didn't greenlight Black Adam, Fury of the Gods, Birds of Prey, all these films. He didn't, he's just tried to save these movies and just to get them to make some money before, James Gunn implements his vision. But James Gunn has also come in at a very, very difficult time. He's come in during a writer's strike. IPs are not what they used to be. And you can look at this movie, and I think about 10 years ago, Michael Keaton being in a DC movie would have been a huger deal, which would have opened up a movie huger to 70 million. But I don't think Michael Keaton has put anyone off. I just don't think he's attracting as many people as they thought he would do. Because, as I say, IPs are no longer the trend. People are desperate for good entertainment. We lack good writers and directors and good filmmakers. And the studios are employing the wrong people and the wrong tactics. Because WB's tactics for the Flash movie have been somewhat embarrassing. The Tom Cruise thing, the Stephen King thing, the advanced screenings. And I've seen tweets from people who went to advanced screenings begging people to go and watch the movie. And when you're begging people, when you're leaking spoilers as a studio, you're in trouble. You know, Andy Muschietti leaking that a CGI version of Christopher Reeve's Superman is going to cameo in the Flash movie. When you do shit like that, you know they're in trouble. They did the same with the Wonder Woman cameo in Fury of the Gods because they knew the movie wasn't going to make as much money as they thought they did. They knew Shazam! Fury of the Gods was going to flop. I wouldn't necessarily call the Flash movie a flop, although I think the kind of money it's going to finish on isn't exactly great either. But this is where we are. Not even MCU movies make $1 billion anymore, let alone the DCEU that's had $1 billion movie. The game is up. Should they have released these movies? They wanted their money back. That's why they released these movies. But I also feel that James Gunn should have done a full reboot and not a soft reboot and get away as far away from the DCEU as possible, because it is a clusterfuck. It is, you know, I say this every day. It doesn't matter if there's some films in the DCEU that we love and I love. Most of them. I love most of them. But it ain't about how I feel about them. Did they work as a business, as an IP, as a franchise? No. The franchise never worked. And as from the moment Snyder left, it's got worse and worse and worse. And yes, it is a little bit depressing if you're a DC fan, but also it might be a good thing if you're a DC fan. We can start again with James Gunn and hopefully he can do the right things, because at the end of the day, apart from the Snyder fans, the general audience do like and trust James Gunn. And we've seen with the Guardians trilogy, we've seen with Guardians Volume 3, Guardians Volume 3 is the first MCU movie to actually make money in a while. So that's an interesting thing. I don't think we're going to see an MCU movie making as much money as Gunn's Guardians 3 for a very, very long time. They are also imploding and they're also in a lot of trouble. So it remains to be seen if the Flash movie can make more domestically on the opening weekend than 70 million, or even worse, make less than 70 million. It's very, very interesting. Let me know in the comments, how do you think it will open up at the box office? Put your bias to one side and think logically. I think a lot of people did think this movie was going to open up big, and if it did open up big, maybe it would have helped give a Blue Beetle a bump. Now, Blue Beetle's going to be in a lot of trouble, because if a movie with cameos, and hype around it like The Flash can only open up to a soft 70 million domestic weekend, Blue Beetle is a character that nobody's heard of. And I mean, then you've got Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. Test screenings haven't gone well, and Amber Heard is still in the movie, which is not going to help. Just like, Ezra Miller being involved in the Flash movie is not helping that movie. When people tell you they're boycotting a movie, they're boycotting a movie. They don't say it for their own health. And, it's not a good time for Hollywood. It's not a good time for Hollywood to be losing money. The writer's strike, maybe a potential actor's strike. They're in a lot of trouble. The quality, the way these people conduct themselves on social media, these actors, writers, directors, they're really off-putting for anyone. If they're not attracting people to their industry. They're driving us, the consumer, away. And this is where we are today. So the last thing they can afford is to lose money. So ultimately, the Flash movie will make its money back with a slight profit. As I say, 600 million, 650, 700 would be a bonus to them, but they ain't gonna break records with this movie. But I think they've done well if they do at least make 6. 600 million, globally. I think that will be a big success if you ask me. Not a big success, but at least they're getting their money back. But it's not going to be the success that, they tried to, tell us it was going to be. The best CBM ever, the best CBM since The Dark Knight and Superman the movie. It is not. But this is what they tried to convince you that it was. But the intelligent people, well, you don't even have to be intelligent. It was obvious that this movie was never as good as The Dark Knight or Superman the movie. Because even if you've only seen the trailers, it's obvious where this movie's problems lie. As I say, it's not a bad movie. The reviews are going to be very, very revealing. I think the reviews will be mixed. I don't think they'll all be positive or they'll all be negative. But I think there will be mixed reviews. Will the Flash movie have a fresh score on Rotten Tomatoes? That's been a problem as well for DCEU movies, getting a fresh score. This has been a problematic situation since Man of Steel. Again, a movie I really, really like. But its Rotten Tomatoes audience scores, probably better than its verified critic scores, but it hasn't been great for the DCEU. And it was the right decision for Zaslav to bring in James Gunn, and for Gunn at least to do some kind of soft reboot. Don't be surprised if he changes his mind and decides to do a full reboot of his DC universe. Again, that's what I would have done if it were me, and if I was given his job, and if I was put in his position. I would have recast everyone. I would have started again. I wouldn't be talking about the Snyderverse. I wouldn't be talking about the DCEU. I would avoid those questions. I'd be respectful, but I wouldn't get into those conversations. He's got himself in trouble, not because he necessarily recast Henry Cavill. It's because he's recasting Henry Cavill, but keeping his Suicide Squad universe as is, bringing in his brother, bringing in his wife. This is why people have attacked him. I don't necessarily agree with those attacks, but he's creating his own problems by not doing a full reboot. This is what you do. And then you get less attacks. And if people ask me, if I'm in James Gunn's position and they go, Mick, why are you starting from scratch? Why are you recasting everyone? Why are you cancelling the DCEU? I say, well, listen, I've come in, I have my ideas. Everyone's in charge of their own vision and their ideas. And I don't want to be trying to fix something that most people who love it don't think needs fixing. So we're going to leave the DCEU where it is. People can enjoy it for eternity. And now we're going to create something new. This is how you win people over, whether it's Snyderverse stands or just ordinary DC stands. This is how it works. So in a lot of ways, Gunn hasn't handled this situation really well. What's been damaging to this year's movies as well isn't just the issues with Ezra Miller and Amber Heard and other situations which I've always brought up today. It's the fact that Gunn started teasing his DC universe in the early stages when his job was announced. And if you've noticed, since they promoted The Flash, he hasn't even revealed the second part of his Gods and Monsters slate, which he was going to do at CinemaCon. So there's a reason for that, because they realized they were making mistakes. Now I think once the Flash movie hype is over and marketing is over, I think you may, if the Flash movie gets, bad word of mouth and it doesn't make a lot of money and not what they wanted, then what they're going to start doing is distracting the narrative by revealing part 2 of the Gods and Monsters slate and start teasing you again with his new DC universe. I suspect that's what they're going to do, because that's what I would have done. Personally, the problem is with entertainment today, it's become too much of a business. And the over-focus of using these IPs for total business instead of artistic integrity is a bigger problem here. And this is why the industry is imploding. When Zaslav came in, he should have looked at these upcoming movies and said, these movies are not going to make us a profit. Just get rid of them. Shelve them, pay the actors what they deserve, what they were always going to get, apologize, to the actors in the movies, say we're terribly sorry, but we have a new vision. You have to be dramatic. You have to be dramatic. What you don't do is shelve Batgirl and release the rest. That isn't a good look either. If you're releasing a movie starring an actor who was seen throttling a young woman and arrested for multiple counts of illegal activities, then you can't be shelving the film starring a young woman who's done nothing wrong. I understand why people are losing their shit over this. As I said from the beginning, you either shelve all of them or you shelve none of them. This has been Friday's edition of the DC Universe Daily with me, Mick, your host with the most. Just ask your girlfriends and your wife. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you never miss this beautiful perfection. And I'll see you again in the next video. Till I see you again, goodbye, au revoir, auf Wiedersehen.